everyone. Today we're going to be doing Explore Africa series. So we're going to be learning about Swahili Coast and its trading cities, okay? As is the case, we're going to do an introduction, objectives, a general history, timeline, quiz, and then conclusion. So if you look at the map, right, this is the Swahili Coast all along here. Like, you know, Mogadishu, Manda, Kilwa. This is all, you know, the Swahili Coast. And if you look on that map, you can see that this part of the map of Africa is on the side of the Indian Ocean. So this is the Indian Ocean. So the Indian Ocean means that you can get access into India and then China. And then you see how close Arabia is. So here's Arabia, very close. And that's the Kingdom of Aksum, which, yeah, you mentioned previously, which we've done history on. Which is ancient Ethiopian civilization. Right, so, yes,
I read about India.
You read about India?
No, I read.
Okay, right. Okay, we're not doing anything about India today. We're doing African studies, but the connection between India and Africa is the Indian Ocean, which is a large body of water that gives access from Africa to the Indian country. So here on the left-hand side, we see this beautiful picture of the Swahili Coast, and you can see all these canoes, right? So the Swahili Coast is a vibrant and culturally rich region along the eastern coast of Africa. It has been a center of trade, culture, and civilization for centuries. So not just for decades, but for centuries, okay? And the Swahili Coast civilization was shockingly located on the Swahili Coast. The civilization grew up along 1,000 miles. So that graph that I showed you is 1,000 miles all along here, right? It's 1,000 miles of coastline on Africa's east coast.
Coastline?
Coastline means it's on the edge of the water, right? The edge of the ocean. So that's what coast means, right? And there are also many barrier islands and coral reefs that are part of this civilization. One major island of the Swahili Coast is Zanzibar. Does anybody know where Zanzibar is?
Zanzibar, I don't know where that is.
Zanzibar is in Tanzania, right? It's a beautiful, beautiful island.
But I don't know.
The Swahili Coast stretches from Somalia to Mozambique. So who can remember where Somalia would be? We've done this already. Who knows where Somalia would be on the map? This is Somalia because Mogadishu is the capital of Somalia. So this area here is Somalia. And that's why Somalia is actually referred to as the Horn of Africa. Because it makes up this horn. Yeah?
Mogadishu said that was Eritrea.
Yeah, Eritrea, Somalia, Ethiopia are the Horn of Africa. So all of this coastline, along with convenient barrier islands, create great natural harbours. This and the civilization's location by the trade winds made it a great location for early maritime trade. And during the civilization's height, between the 8th and the 15th centuries, the Swahili influence spread inland to Central Africa locations. So from here, it spread to inside Africa, okay? That's how deeply influential Swahili was. And most of the civilization consisted of flat coastlines, and some spread into the also flat desert areas. So let's go back to this introduction. So we see that this coastal stretch is known for its historical trading cities that played a crucial role in connecting Africa with the wider Indian Ocean world. So as we said, here's the Indian Ocean, and here is all the parts of the Swahili coastline all along there. The Swahili had an extensive trade network. It includes the Red Sea. So who knows where the Red Sea is?
Next to Jeddah.
Can you show me? Go and point to where the Red Sea is. All right? Can you see the Red Sea? Red Sea, between Arabia and this sort of northern part of Africa.
Egypt.
Okay? So included the Red Sea to Egypt, Oman on the Arabian Peninsula, Shiraz in Persia, Goa and Cambay in India, and China. So the primary centers for the Swahili Coast were in quite a number of modern day African countries like Kenya, Tanzania, Madagascar, and So those were primarily where the Swahili coastline was. So, for example, we had Mombasa in Kenya, we had Kilwa Kisiwani in Tanzania, Mogadishu in Somalia. We had stone towns, for example. We had the Shanga, Manda, and the Gede in Kenya. We had the Chakwa, Ras Nkumbu, Songomnara, and Sanjayakati, Tumbatu, and the Kilwa in Tanzania. We had the Mahalika in Madagascar. We had the Kinzakazi, Dimbani in the Zanzibar island. And we had other towns like the Takwa, the Vumbaku in Kenya, the Ras Kisimani and the Ras Nkumbu in Tanzania. And we had another one of the towns in, again, Zanzibar island. So that's just a brief overview of how important the Swahili coastline became. So our objectives is, first of all, we're going to learn why the Swahili coast in East Africa is important in history and culture. We're going to learn about the trading cities and how it helped people from different places and the exchange of culture, and also the commerce and everything that happened around the Indian Ocean, and understand why the Swahili coast and its trading cities still matter today in East Africa. So this first image we're looking at is an ancient origins of the Swahili coast history, and it dates back to the early centuries when coastal settlements engaged in trade with the Middle East, Persia, India and China. So here we see that the earliest Swahili culture developed in the Tana Valley and the Lamu Islands from indigenous Bantu-speaking populations around the 6th century. Yes?
What is all these black bits?
That's aging. That's part of the aging process. So that's a lot of dirt. And in modern times, you've got them, for some buildings that have this kind of dirt, they actually sandblast. So they get rid of all that dirt and they bring it back to its original, beige looking colour. But for historical purposes, this will not be touched. This will be preserved just throughout history, just to demonstrate that, it's only nature, it's a natural degradation. It has nothing to do with any human influence in changing the facade of this building. So we see that stone houses, this is a typical image of a stone house as well. This is how they would have carved it out in stone. Stone house is very typical in the Swahili culture, and many of them can be seen in a Lamu old town. So a first mention of this Lamu old town was in Portuguese sources, and this was round about the 14th century. Lamu Old Town is the oldest and best preserved Swahili settlement in East Africa, and it retains some of its traditional functions. So again, this is something that's historical, and it's lovely to see that we can go back in time and see how ancient African civilizations were. So this image is an image that was taken of a place called Gede. It was the ruins of a place called Gede, a medieval Swahili settlement in Kenya, and these old buildings were shown to researchers were particularly interested in demonstrating that the people in those times lived here. So they took evidence, material, just to demonstrate that there were people, Swahili people, who lived here in these times. And these are the ruins. This is what they've been able to preserve from all those, hundreds of years of degradation that occurred. So onto the Swahili language. The term Swahili refers to both the people of the East African coast and their unique Bantu Arabic language, which has roots in Arabic and incorporates elements of African language. So the Kiswahili or Swahili language is a language which originated many centuries ago between the Lamu archipelago and Zanzibar. So who knows what an archipelago is? Does anyone know what an archipelago is?
So it's like an island.
Yeah, close. So it's a lot of islands grouped together, or islands that are separated by a body of water. So where you find like clusters of islands upon islands, those are referred to as archipelago. So the Swahili coast is very common with archipelagos. And Who knows what Swahili actually means? Does anyone know what Swahili means? Yeah, does anybody know what Swahili means? Yeah, do you know what it means? It has a meaning. So Swahili means edge or coast. So it means people that live on edge. Because if you look at the map, they're actually on the edge. So between the land and the water, okay? So they are referred to as Swahili. It means edge. And this language belongs to the family of Bantu languages that are spread nearly all over the whole eastern and southern parts of the African continent. And interestingly, a lot of the language today, it gets its influences, ideas, words, and knowledge from many places around Africa, Arabia, Asia, and Europe. And who knows why it would have been influenced in that manner? Who knows why the language gets its ideas, words, knowledge from many places around Africa, Arabia, Asia, and Europe? Who can tell me why? Why? We already said that they trade. That coastal region, remember, there's a body of water, so you're going to have a lot of people come. Exactly. So the next thing that we're going to look at are the trading hubs, right? So look at that image. So that image, you can see that that's an island, right? So if you look, this is an island, yeah? You can tell that this is all water. This is all water, all water, all, and you can see that's a ship. All water. And then in the middle, this is where the trade and the commerce and everything happens. These are the buildings where everything happens, right? So this is what would have been very common across the archipelago. They would have had probably structures like this in the center of the island that would have acted as a center for trade and for commerce. Okay, so we see that it says cities like Kilwa, Zanzibar, Mombasa, and Lamu became bustling trading hubs connecting East Africa and, you know, distant lands. So interestingly, Kilwa, so the Kilwa Sultanate was the island state that dominated medieval East Africa. It was a very, very powerful group of people that ruled over East Africa. And for centuries, it thrived as a hub, an international hub for connecting the African continent to the wider Indian Ocean world. And its ideal location meant that it was a much better trade center than Mogadishu or any of the other major parts or towns along the Swahili coast. So let's just go back and look at that map, right? So that we can actually see what we're talking about. So this is where they're talking about Kilwa. So it said Kilwa was a better location to Mogadishu here, right? It was a better location to Mogadishu. And because it just says it was ideal. It had a much better trading center. And for some reason, it was just easier access for people coming across the Indian Ocean to trade. It was just, it just made better sense. It's just like how you have various capitals in the world, right? Like in the UK, the capital of the UK is London, right? Why London? Why not Birmingham? Why not Manchester? For some reason, it was just ease of, you know, trade, ease of commerce. It just meant it was more viable. Okay, so sometimes it's not even like it's man-made or engineered. Sometimes it's just for ease, it's just for convenience. Okay, and we see that Mogadishu and Kilwa, they had this battle, right? They both wanted to dominate coastline. They wanted to dominate the commerce because whoever had control could make the most money, right? Could become the richest empire. Mogadishu and Kilwa battled for dominance. They wanted to be the ones leading that Swahili coastline because whoever was in charge had the opportunity to make money. So guess what? Mogadishu and the Kilwa Sultanate battled and they fought, right? And eventually Kilwa defeated Mogadishu, and in its defeat of Mogadishu, it took over Sofala. So Sofala, let's show you where Sofala is located. So, okay, you can see Sofala all the way down there. So that's Sofala. So Kilwa was so powerful, it had victory over Mogadishu, and it took over Sofala. And the taking over of Sofala meant that it even had now massive influx of gold for the Kilwa Sultan. So they became even rich and even more powerful. So the next image here is we're going to look at the commerce and the culture of those times. And who knows what these are on the screen now?
I think coins.
They're coins. So these are the coins that they would have used to trade in those times. And interestingly, these coins, do you know where these coins were found?
In Lagos.
No?
Nigeria.
No? They were found.
in a rock.
No, they were found in faraway Australia. Australia is really, really far away.
No, you
Right,
right.
Australia is really, really far away. It's so far away that, you know, researchers, historians, archaeologists are just marveled that, oh, so trade was going on between, you know, people in the Australias and people of the Swahili Coast. Majority of the population involved in the Swahili culture, however, lived in communities that were made up of houses of earth and thatch. And then we find that the people in those times, they mostly fished and farmed in their own way, but they were changed by things from far away through trade. So that's what happens when your country or your kingdom is opened up to trade. Somehow you're going to be influenced by, you know, some of the things that come from across the sea. It could be anything. It could be language, it could be culture, it could be food, it could be how you dress, right? You will get those influences, no doubt. And one major influence on this region, that Swahili Coast, was Islam, right? Islamic culture and religion provided the underlying basis for the construction of many of the later towns and buildings in the Swahili culture. Particularly, they have like their mosque. It was influenced by Islam. In these cultures as well, they had town walls, and these town walls served to deter against coastal zone erosion, because anybody that lives along the coast, you're going to be subject to erosion that happens over time. So with the impact of the water and the waves beating and slapping against, you know, the soil, it's going to cause some kind of degradation to the soil. Or equally, these town walls can be used to keep cattle from roaming. So at least you know the cattle's are in an enclosed environment and they're not going to escape. So here we're going to look at their architectural marvels. Like, see how beautifully, you know, these stone, like coral stones, have been carved out. And look at the arch. Look at the arch. It's a beautiful arch. Look at the arch, how it's been cut. That would have taken time and a lot of skill. And on the right hand side, we see a carved wooden door as well. So the Swahili Coast was renowned for its architecture and, you know, its wood carvings. The Swahili Coast is known for its distinctive architecture, featuring intricately carved wooden doors and coral stone buildings, which showcase the influence of different cultures. So what do you think would have been one of the primary influences in this coral stone building? So it would have been influenced by Islam. So the earliest houses at Swahili sites, perhaps as early as the 6th century, were earth and thatch. Later houses and other structures were built of coral or stone, and sometimes they had like a second story. And Swahili traders began building in stone and coral shortly after 1000 CE. So the door that you can see on the right hand side here has a rosette and lotus pattern derived from Indian carving, and is from the coastal town of Bagamoyo in Tanzania. And on the left is the actual prayer room in the Kilwa Great Mosque. It's built partly from coral stone. It was begun in the 11th century. It is the oldest surviving mosque in East Africa. Okay, so here we have an image of what a stone house looks like. We're going to look at the Omani influence in the region as well. So this is typically what a stone house town would look like. There would be lots of houses that look exactly like this in that region. So in 1698, Zanzibar became part of Oman after they defeated Portuguese at Mombasa. Communities that had stone houses were often referred to as stone towns. In 1832, the Omani Sultan moved to Stone Town and started growing cloves and welcoming Indian traders. So until 1890, Zanzibar controlled part of the Swahili Coast and it controlled part of the Swahili Coast called Zanj. And that name Zanj is very important, right? So bear that name in mind. Yes. Then the British and German empires became influential in Zanzibar. So today, Zanzibar is like its own place within Tanzania. made up of islands called the Zanzibar archipelago. Now, who knows what an archipelago is? Group of islands, right? Very good. Okay. So next we have another painful part of history, which is slavery and its abolition. So here, the Swahili Coast played a significant role in the Eastern African slave trade. However, it was also an active participant in the efforts to abolish the slave trade in the 19th century. Okay, so here we see that the Indian Ocean slave trade is sometimes known as the East African slave trade or Arab slave trade. Who remembers there was another time that we learned about the Arab slave trade? Who remembers we talked about the Arab slave trade?
That Zambia.
No, we talked about the Arab slave trade 2 weeks ago. It was to do with the Trans-Sahara trade, right?
Oh, yeah.
We also mentioned the Arab slave trade, so well done for remembering that. Okay, so we see that the Kilwa Sultanate thrived due to its participation in the Indian Ocean slave trade. So not only was Kilwa making powerful moves and trying to dominate the Swahili Coast, it was also exploiting its own people as well and profiting off them being sold into slavery. Traders captured Bantu people known as Zanj. Remember I mentioned Zanj? From East Africa's non-Muslim interior and sold them throughout East Africa, the Middle East and Asia. An estimated 8 million people were transported from the 7th century until 1920. So that's circa 5,700 people per year that were being sold into slavery. So also we see that European slave trade in the Indian Ocean, because Europeans, they never want to be left out, they also want to exploit, began when Portugal established Estado de India, which is Portuguese India in that region in the early 16th century. In all, European traders exported between 500,000 to 700,000 slaves within the Indian Ocean between 1500 and 1850. And almost that same amount were exported from the Indian Ocean to the Americas during the same period. The slave trade in the Indian Ocean was nevertheless very limited compared to the 12 million slaves approximately that were exported across the Atlantic. As a result of the Zanj, remember I talked about the Zanj people? As a result of the Zanj rebellion, so these were a group of people that just had enough. They were not going to put up with slavery anymore. As a result of the Zanj rebellion, Abbasid Caliphate largely abandoned the large-scale importation of slaves from East Africa. So because these people stood up for themselves and were like, we're not going to be enslaved by anybody, we're not going to be dominated by anybody, and they fought. Some of them would have probably lost their lives and whatnot. The Abbasid Caliphate decided that it was a bit too expensive and it was not worth the trouble. So that was one of the reasons why slavery kind of like just died down from the Abbasid Caliphate point of view. The ivory trade. So who knows where ivory comes from? Raise your hand.
Elephant tusk.
Very good. So ivory comes from elephant tusk. And as you can see in the image,
Oh, yeah.
these are all elephant tusks. Okay, look at it. Elephant tusks,
And they're very
right?
long.
So ivory was a particularly valuable commodity for the Swahili Coast, attracting traders from around the world. The trade in ivory had profound ecological impacts on East African elephant populations. Remember what we said when we were doing the history of the Trans-Sahara trade routes, that the North African elephant actually became extinct because of this trade in ivory. People were killing them and taking off the tusk. And obviously, that ended the population of the North African elephant. Yes.
Why are the tusks so long?
Because, have you seen an elephant? An elephant is huge. Probably if you stood next to an elephant, you would just probably not even reach up to its knee. Elephants are huge, so you can imagine how the size of their tusks. Ivory was super valuable, especially from elephant tusks, and lots of people wanted it along the Swahili Coast. This trade made the cities along the coast rich, and it attracted traders from far away. But it also hurt the elephant population a lot, and that was a big problem for nature. Ivory was moved along special roads, and these routes helped it to get to other countries. As time went on, people realised the damage it was doing to elephants, so they started making rules to protect them and stop illegal ivory trade. The ivory trade was a big deal in the past, and it had a big impact on the environment and the economy of these regions. So here we see colonial era, and that's when you have Europeans, other invaders come into the continent and try to dominate various African countries and African kingdoms. European colonial powers, including the Portuguese, German and British, had a presence on the Swahili Coast, influencing the region's history. In the past, the Portuguese, Germans and British came to the Swahili Coast to take control of the area and its resources. This impacted the locals, changing how they were governed and how they owned land. The Europeans also wanted to control the trade routes and ports, like the Portuguese did. While this was happening, there was an exchange of cultures between the Swahili Coast and the Europeans. This exchange affected things like art, language and traditions. Eventually, in the mid-20th century, the countries on the Swahili Coast started to fight for their independence from the colonial powers like Kenya and Tanzania. This was a big turning point in their history. The colonial era brought many changes to the Swahili Coast, affecting its societies, trade and culture, and leading to the fight for independence. So here is a stunning view of present-day Tanzania, and this is what a city would look like. Look at the stunning landscape, the water, the skyscrapers. So you can see that they're also rich in development as well. The Swahili Coast remains a vibrant hub of diversity culturally, where people from various backgrounds coexist and celebrate their traditions, languages and heritage. Coastal cities continue to play a crucial role in the region's economies, particularly through trade, tourism and fishing. They are essential contributors to the livelihoods of many. The Swahili Coast is home to well-preserved historical sites and architectural wonders, attracting tourists and researchers interested in the rich history of the region. The Swahili Coast fosters ongoing cultural exchange, influence in art, music and cuisine. This exchange is a testament to the blending of indigenous and foreign influences. The region's strategic location along the Indian Ocean makes it a gateway for international trade and the diplomacy connecting East Africa to the global community. So timeline is just a quick summary of what we've talked about. So in a nutshell, 1st century, beginnings of trade along the Swahili Coast. Then we see in the 8th and 10th centuries, flourishing of the trading cities. So we see trading cities begin to pop up like the Kilwa, Mogadishu, etc. So in the 18th to the 19th centuries, we begin to see the Omani influence in the region. In the 19th century, there was a decline of the slave trade and the spread of European colonial powers. And in the 20th century, we see independence and the development of modern coastal cities. So quiz, question 1. What is the Swahili Coast known for? A, dense rainforests. B, vast deserts. C, rich trading history. Question 2. Which language do the people of Swahili Coast speak? A, Arabic. B, French. C, Swahili. Question 3. Which commodities were commonly traded along the Swahili Coast? A, silk and tea. B, gold, ivory, spices and textiles. C, fruits and vegetables. Question 4. Which architectural features is the Swahili Coast known for? A, skyscrapers. B, carved wooden doors and coral stone buildings. C, mud huts and thatched roofs. Question 5. What was the role of the Swahili Coast in the East African slave trade? A, major slave trading hub. B, didn't take part in slave trade. C, against slave trade. All right, so answers now. In conclusion, first point, we see that the Swahili Coast and its trading cities stand as a testament to the enduring legacy of trade, culture, and history in East Africa. Second point, we see that these cities have played pivotal roles in shaping the region's cultural diversity and have contributed significantly to the global exchange of goods and ideas. And the final point is the Swahili Coast continues to enchant visitors with its rich heritage and contemporary significance in the modern world. So that's it. Thank you guys for listening.